Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner from the Robust Opposition, and I'd like to welcome you to my show tonight. With me is my first guest, Isaiah Madison. How you doing, Isaiah?
Good, how are you?
And we are going to be discussing these two bad housing bills, the final of 9 bad housing bills that Scott Wiener, by hook or by crook, has been trying to get through our legislature. And it seems like with everybody worried about the pandemic, he may just get a couple of them passed, but maybe we could just keep it down to the least of the worst. And then in a half an hour, I'm going to have on Trent Lang from the California Clean Money Campaign, who's going to talk about Los Angeles's voting system that we had so many problems with in the March primary, that Secretary of State Alex Padilla is poised to certify, and he's only having one public hearing on Monday. So there's going to be a Zoom call tomorrow that you can participate in and learn what you can do to try to make that bad system a little bit better. So this is a California show, and we're going to get right into it. So let me start by reading Isaiah's bio here from the Lusk Center at the Lusk Center for Real Estate at the University of Southern California, where he is a graduate. And it says here, Isaiah Madison is an area representative for the Empowerment Congress West area, which is the neighborhood council of Leimert Park, Baldwin Hills, and Crenshaw. He is the chair of their Planning, Land Use, and Beautification Committee. In 2019, Isaiah graduated from USC's Berkeley Urban Studies program, focusing on land use and real estate finance. While there, he helped reestablish the undergraduate real estate club. And after graduating, he worked briefly for a Southern California home builder in land acquisitions. Now, with a bio like that, one would think he would go into being a real estate developer, but no, you're on the side of the people. So I want to start off by asking you to briefly describe what made you help the people and not the corporations.
Sure. Well, I've always been a fan of urbanism and a fan of the built environment. Prior to wanting to help my community or wanting to work for a developer, I love freeways and transit. And when I was a kid, I used to collect these maps, booklets. They're called Thomas guides. They're what real estate agents used before Google Maps. And so I've always loved that stuff. And my mom, when I was a kid, she went to USC also, and she studied architecture and construction management. So I had a lot of influence as a child to see what the whole design process is like for building. So I've always been kind of inspired. But when I went to Berkeley and studied urban studies there, we were fed a lot of pro-development, pro-transit oriented development ideas. It's a liberal arts degree, so it wasn't super technical in how planners facilitate housing, their housing elements, and how the process is regulated. But it was a lot of, what makes cities nice and what's desirable. And a lot of that was just, pro-development, a pro-development agenda. So when I came back home to South LA and I started organizing with the community, because I organized with the community before I went to Berkeley as well, there I just hit a wall because there is such anti-market rate development sentiment in my neighborhood. So I really had to take a pause and try to reconcile the differences between what all the people in my neighborhood were telling me and what I've learned in school as the right approach to our housing crisis in California.
Right. So let's talk about these bills now. There are 2 bills that we're going to talk about tonight, but first let's talk about the previous versions that we managed to beat back. The most famous was last year, SB 50. And I think that's when I first met you. You were moderating a forum in South LA where Paul Corrett spoke, and Jan Perry and Holly Mitchell. And it was a great event. And talk about that one. They had one before that, SB 827, and all the other ones that we managed to get rid of this year.
Yeah, so, since since a few legislators have been in office, particularly ones from the Bay Area, they have proposed quite a few number of bills that supersede local control and place all land use rights virtually in the hands of real estate developers who do what they want in our communities. So, you know, my community and tons of communities around the state had a major problem with that, and we just started organizing on a very local level, on a grassroots level, going door to door, calling our friends and our neighbors and telling them about this. Most people don't even understand that their house could be upzoned for a 5-story building. You know, it's not something that they think about when they buy their house. It's not something that they feel they need to worry about. So it was pretty easy to organize against those bills because they were so blunt. You know, all these ideas are coming from Bay Area legislatures that have a different problem than Los Angeles has in terms of availability of land, in terms of housing crisis, in terms of the jobs, housing imbalance. So, you know, this one-size-fits-all approach is really not working for us as a state.
Talk about the actual bills, though, what they called for, so that we can have a little comparison to what these new bills are.
Yeah, so both of those bills were transit-oriented development bills that had a one-size-fits-all density and height requirement for parcels by transit. So it was particularly impactful upon the inner city and places by transit, which are predominantly low income and predominantly places where people of color live, because it's this thought that, you know, we can just take transit instead of using our automobiles to get around, which again, speaking to the Bay Area, you know, Southern California divide that these politics are playing on, you know, transit is a more viable option in the Bay Area than it is in Los Angeles. So both the bills 827 and SB 50 just upzoned all single family areas and all apartment areas by transit to allow for very large buildings.
Okay, now talk about let's first talk about 1120, SB 1120, before we talk about AB 725, because we think that 1120 is the worst one. And if we can defeat that, worst case scenario, we get 725, it's not so bad. Talk about what they say they are designed to do, and then what we think they will actually do. And you can talk about specific legislation in Ballard, Washington, because I saw a photo of that and it was really quite striking.
Yeah. So SB 1120 is being marketed as a duplex bill. It's more complicated than that because it also allows you to split lots and then construct duplexes on both lots that are created from the lot split. So in reality, it's more of a fourplex bill because any home can be split into two lots. And hold on one second. Any home can be split into two lots and have duplex built on both properties. So it's not a duplex bill, it's a fourplex bill. In addition, the legislation allows cities to choose whether or not they can each housing development has ADUs. So,
well, let me just explain for people that don't understand the lingo. That stands for an accessory dwelling unit. Yes. And people can already have those in their houses. So if you had two houses on a lot, and then they had accessory dwelling units, that could be 4 houses, but ultimately you could have 8 houses, right? Isn't there a configuration where you could have 8 houses?
You could have 8 houses because each of the housing units on each parcel can have an ADU. So 4 housing units, 4 ADUs, 8 homes.
Now they'll tell you that there's restrictions on the height and that certain communities are going to be exempt, and you know, all these things they'll tell you to take into account all of our objections, but we have counters to those, right?
Yeah, and I think the biggest counter is that this is a purely market rate bill. So where SB 50 or SB 827, a certain percent of units had to be set aside for affordable housing, affordable covenant housing. Not this. This is a purely market rate bill, and like we saw in Washington, when a similar proposal was passed, we see a house that maybe $500,000 be divided into 4 houses where they each cost $700,000 or $800,000. So it's not bringing affordability to the market at all. If anything, it's raising our land values because it raises the buildability of each single family home. So it's just counterproductive completely to what our goals are in South LA.
Now talk about why it's also a civil rights issue. I mean, you guys excerpted that comment. It was about a 4-minute clip from Sydney Comlager Dove, your representative, in which she talked about the racial covenants and how hard it was for African Americans to build up wealth, and most of their wealth was in their houses. I used to cite a statistic that after the financial collapse of 2008, I think it was 47% of African Americans and 53% of Latinos had zero net worth because all of their equity was in their homes. So those that still have their homes, talk about the civil rights and the racial justice aspect of this.
Yeah, well, home ownership is the key is the entryway to middle class status for lots of immigrants, who come to California and to America to build their American dream. So I would say from a Latino perspective, destroying the equity of millions of middle-class Latinos across Southern California is a civil rights issue when you've saved every penny working as an undocumented person doing janitorial work or watching children. Your house is very important to your well-being, and that's just from the Latino perspective. From the Black perspective, Black people have been stewards of this community in South LA ever since it was desegregated. There was a time where Black people couldn't live in this community, and it was a dream come true for so many families that still own their homes in South LA to finally be able to buy a house here. So it's just wrong on so many levels to silence them when we're screaming that we don't want these bills and that we're willing to facilitate growth in our community, but please just let us have a say on it, and please just let us direct you to where are the best spots to improve our community that has suffered from so much disinvestment. We have so many vacant parcels in South LA, not just like a closed store, but literally dirt parcels where apartments should be going up if we really need them, affordable apartments. And that isn't happening with this legislation. It's really just upzoning houses.
And also there's the issue of the neighbors, because here's what can happen. Say you're a homeowner and you choose, because you could always say, well, you don't have to sell your home. But look, if somebody's offering you a lot of money, if a developer's offering you a lot of money, chances are, especially if you're heading close to retirement age and maybe you want to move out of California, chances are you'll take the money. And then they'll build, these 8 double-story units, and then the single family house that remains will be in between this. So it'll affect their peace of mind. And, I think for a lot of people that say, oh, this is a bunch of NIMBYs, that don't want, that they have a single family home and now they don't want anyone else to get their homes. That's also a myth too, because something like 35%, is it, of Los Angeles, I think it's 68% is single family homes, but the other 35% or 32% is multifamily. And there already is a lot of density in this community. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, especially in South LA, in my community plan in Los Angeles, the majority of our land is zoned for multifamily. Single family homes in South LA comprise, I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head, but around 30-something% of single family homes. LA is a majority single family homes, but those homes are mostly in the valley. So to take away the few single family homes that are in South LA is inequitable. This is the largest middle class Black area in the country. It rivals Prince George County, Maryland, and it's a unique and a special place, and we should be seeking to preserve it for those reasons.
Okay, now who is behind these bills? Talk a little bit about Scott Wiener. Talk about this group that's called the YIMBYs. Tell us what that stands for.
Yeah.
And then I want to talk about why you think they are not a sincere response to the need for affordable housing.
Yeah, so the YIMBYs, yes, in my backyard. I mean, I think it's more like yes in your backyard, because they're trying to upzone everyone's house, not, in neighborhoods that they're not even from or live in today. And, they're a big tech funded group that, tries to lobby on the behalf of developers, and tech companies are in a real pickle, especially in the Bay Area, because they keep adding lots of jobs in places that aren't building housing. They're shooting themselves in the foot they just recently, Facebook leased a whole skyscraper in San Francisco recently, and they're building more and more offices in Mountain View and Palo Alto, but no housing is getting built. So in order to combat that problem, they're trying to upzone the whole state, and therefore the neighborhoods that they need to build housing in. So it's really, it's a kind of an act of desperation, in my opinion. And in addition, they're lobbying for Airbnb. They're running some bills that help Airbnb keep their rentals in places, in Tennessee's in Common, and in condominium complexes that want to ban them. So they just lobby for big tech and real estate. They're not sincere, because they're not working with people in communities that are at risk of displacement. They're saying they're promoting legislation that will help those people, but if you just go and talk to those people in person in their communities, they often don't know who these groups are at all. And so it's just kind of disingenuous. They're using a lot of racial history to try to push their legislation, but neither of the two Black senators voted yes on SB 50 in the legislature. It's not looking like many, if any at all, will be voting yes on SB 1120. So they have their messages mixed up, and they don't know what our community actually wants, which is to make it better, to preserve it, to plan it. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I think it's very dangerous to take away local control. I think it's very important. We also have the ability, even within a neighborhood, to decide, the character of that neighborhood. And that takes away some of the ability to do that, environmental impact reports and whatnot. Now, talk about your organization, because it's sort of like David and Goliath. I mean, these people are financed, they've got real estate money behind them, developer money, tech money, as you've said. And there's little Livable California that only recently started putting stuff on Facebook. I would say to you guys, come on, you're sending me these emails. It doesn't even have I can't share this. I don't have an email list anymore. I do everything on Facebook. So now you have stuff to share on Facebook. Tell me about Livable California and what their angle is.
Yeah, so Livable California, I call it a big tent, because it's for all conversations about local control. Whether you believe that only public housing should be built, or whether you just have concerns about mobility and infrastructure. We're just a very diverse group of renters, homeowners, city officials who are committed to trying to preserve local control, and committed to showing our face or voicing our opinions at public hearings where YIMBYs are trying to support their bills. Livable California is a resource, a news resource for you to find out about new bills being proposed, and it's a website that you can share with your friends and your family to keep them updated about new housing bills as well.
Okay, now let's talk about the other bill, which is AB 725, which is the one that we think may get passed because we're really going to put all our effort into 1120. So let's touch briefly on what that bill does in layman's language.
Okay, so SB 725 requires cities to put a portion of their RENA allocation, which is the housing unit allocation that comes from the state, into missing middle housing production areas. So it could result in the upzoning of low density areas, duplexes and single family homes into areas where apartments can be built. You know, the good thing about AB 25 is that it allows cities to decide where apartments go, and it allows the whole local process to play out, you know, as opposed to SB 1120, which is a one size fits all, every single house in the state gets upzoned. So, you know, it's a step in the right direction in local control. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any funding for affordable housing still, which is ultimately what communities that are at risk of displacement need. But it's much better.
Yeah. So today, that bill passed the Senate. Because first a bill passes in the House that it was written. So it had passed the Assembly, now it passed the Senate, and it needs to go for what's called concurrence. But what is happening possibly tomorrow? SB 1120 has not passed the Assembly yet. So what are we asking people to do?
So first and foremost, we're asking people to go to your assembly person's website, and in the contact section, contact them and tell them how much you oppose this bill. On Livable California's website, we have letters that you can use to copy and paste to put in there if you'd like, or you can write something very short and simple, but it's important that you use that contact form to contact your assembly person, because sometimes they're not reading the emails that we send them. And by doing that, you know, for some assembly people, they'll take it upon themselves to respond to you after the vote and tell you how they voted, and tell you, you know, what that means for your community. So I would do that first. But aside from that, please tell your family and friends that this bill's coming, and tell them to do the same with their assembly person. If you've done that, you can email other assembly people and tell them how you feel, tell them how it's going to affect your neighborhood, because I think all assembly people are interested in hearing from all Californians. So, yes.
So you're not necessarily targeting specific, like in the email you say, you're not necessarily targeting specific legislators who are on the fence who are persuadable.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would target Latino legislators in the Inland Empire and Los Angeles County, in San Bernardino County and Riverside County, because these are areas with large Latino home ownership. And often the Latino neighborhoods don't have the same history of organizing that a lot of the white and the Black neighborhoods do. You know, the voter participation is much higher in those communities because they're a lot more civically engaged. So making sure that you're reaching out to people in the Latino caucus that understand how important home ownership is to Latinos, I think that is a good strategy. I can read some off. Freddie Rodriguez in Ontario and Pomona would be a good one to contact. Blanca Rubio in Baldwin Park and Covina. Eloise Reyes in Fontana and San Bernardino. There's like 8, I'll read them all. Anthony Rendon in Paramount and Lakewood and Linwood. He's the Speaker of the Assembly. So it's crucial that he hears how we feel about this bill. Let's see, who else do I have? James Ramos of Rancho Cucamonga and San Bernardino. Jose Medina of Moreno Valley, Riverside. Wendy Carrillo of Boyle Heights and K-Town and Eagle Rock, and one more, Ian Calderon of Whittier and La Puente and La Mirada.
All right, well, I'm going to ask you to put their names and contact information into the comments of this live stream, and also your link to Livable California, both the website and the Facebook page, just so people can get more information. I'm also going to put a very long, well, not very long. It was an 18-minute presentation by John Gonzalez about this bill for those technical people out there that want to know and want to see some of the pictures to envision what we were talking about. But also feel free to tweet these legislators. I often find that tweeting and posting on their social media pages, it's not too terribly difficult to do, and sometimes it makes a difference. So I want to thank you very much. And one thing I want to say is this is Toni Atkins's bill. We hadn't said that. She is the Speaker of the Senate and therefore very powerful. And that is one reason I understand that every single senator voted, including Holly Mitchell, who was against SB 50. And people in the community see that as a real betrayal. And maybe Herb Wesson, who is running against her for the supervisor seat, is going to get a leg up because of this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And bringing up that point, it's Toni's bill. So if we don't kill it in the assembly, it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to kill it when it returns to the Senate. Toni and Scott Wiener are working together in the LGBT caucus, and Toni's married to a developer, so it's all dirty politics, and we need to put a stop to it.
Yeah, well, I just want to tell this is no surprise to my viewers because we're constantly talking about corporate Democrats. We know in California legislature we have what they call the oily Democrats that are in the pocket of the fossil fuel companies. So even though we have a Democratic legislature here in California, it doesn't always go on behalf of the people. And that is also no surprise to my viewers who are looking very sadly on what happened with our Democratic primary for president. But this is something that we can affect, folks. It's on the local level. And, it's always a good idea to develop a relationship with your representative, your state assembly member and your state senator, because there's going to be opportunities for you to lobby them on other issues too. So too many people, in my opinion, focus on federal things. We're really much closer to our local and state officials, and that's where I think we should be focusing. So thank you very much, Isaiah. I'm going to ask you to duck out so I could bring in my next guest.
All right, so I just press leave.
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right, folks. So now I'm going to bring in Trent Lang, who is one of my favorite people in Los Angeles. Let's hope this goes well. Here he comes. Hey, Trent, how you doing? Can you hear me? Oh, he says he's connecting to audio.
Hey, Lauren, how you doing?
I'm good. So let me do a start of the show for people that are just joining us on the robust opposition. This is my second guest for the night, and he is Trent Lang, and he is the president and executive director of the California Clean Money Campaign. And I've known Trent for at least 10 years. I remember the first time we worked together, your organization, we were trying to sponsor, we were supporting this ballot initiative for public financing of the Secretary of State's race.
Yes, exactly.
And I remember doing a film of the, what was it called? It was that movie about Jack Abramoff. Remember that documentary?
Yeah, that was great.
And that was when I first met you. But anyway, so you're here to talk tonight about Los Angeles's new voting system. And people may remember, although life pre-pandemic seems a very long time ago, but I was very involved with focusing on that. I did a program with Holly Mosher. In October, we went and we tested out this system. We noted some of the problems. We talked in that show about what some of the security issues were. We tried to highlight them. Before the conditional certification that Alex Padilla did, and that didn't really work because he conditionally certified it. And then we had a big, excuse my French, shit show in the March primary.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah, but that wasn't so much because of the security issues. That was more the connectivity issues. So you and I, we had a meeting with actually Janice Hahn. And it went very well, no, you weren't in that meeting with Janice Hahn. That was me and Janine Roan. Yeah, so me and Janine Roan had a really good meeting with Janice Hahn. And we talked to her about a lot of the problems, and we were very happy to see her say the next day when she talked about the voting system, a lot of our ideas. And we were very excited because we thought, oh, we got in there. We didn't have to just have 30 seconds of public comment. We actually had a sit-down meeting with the legislator. And look, she's incorporated our ideas in her speech. But then, you know, we had the pandemic. Well, actually, you and Holly and I and Jed, we met. We went all the way down there, but we had to be on a phone call with the member. It was Sheila Kuehl's chief of staff, right?
I think so, yes. And we met with, I think, Hans Staffer in person, which was the last in-person lobbying meeting I've done since.
Yes. So we had these great meetings, we had these great plans, and then everything sort of fell by the wayside. At least I know I stopped working on the issue. So maybe you can fill us in on what's been happening with the LA voting system, and then we can talk a little bit about what people can do to try to see if we can make a difference at this late date.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Lauren. And yeah, it's been really fun working with you all these years, all the way back to Prop 15. And we're going to get back to public financing campaigns here in California too, because we need it here and nationally. But we also need to have fair elections. Are you hearing me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. We also need to have fair elections, which counts for not only the normal stuff that California Clean Money Campaigns works on, like public financing and the Disclose Act, but we got to make sure the votes are counted properly. So we grew concerned about the new Los Angeles voting system, which is the first publicly developed voting system anywhere in the country that uses these fancy new ballot marking devices. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars on it in the first place. And there are some things about them that are really good. We would rather that people use hand-marked paper ballots, but you know, some people certainly with disabilities need ballot marking devices, and they have some very nice features to them. They made it very easy for people to use those ways. But the problem is they built in some big insecurities that are very problematic. So one big thing is the whole idea with California requires all ballots be cast with paper ballots, either that you mark them by hand, like vote by mail, or if the county uses ballot marking devices like LA's new system, that they have to print out a real paper ballot that you, the voter, then gets to read over and verify that it has your votes on it before you cast your ballot officially. So everybody remember, whatever you're doing this, look at them very, very carefully. A lot of people don't. But the problem is that these ballots don't just print out in English or whatever your language is what you voted on that you can actually read and verify, but it also uses a QR code. And the QR code, unfortunately, barcode, that's what the scanners, the talliers actually count. And people can't read a QR code. So it doesn't matter, it doesn't do you any good if you verify that it prints out in English your right votes, but if the machine was hacked and they mess up with the QR code, you can't notice that. So lots of activists all across the country are concerned about that. There have been states like Georgia that are still using them. Though just last year, the Colorado Secretary of State actually banned the use of QR codes from these ballot marking devices. They have to the scanners actually have to read the English that's written on the page. So Colorado can do it, California can do it too. Unfortunately, LA's doesn't. So that's one really big problem. Another thing that these machines do, that's another major problem, is after you have a chance to read over the ballot and verify your votes, that you're required to cast the ballot back into the exact same machine, into the same printer slot that printed it out for you. And it goes right under the print head on the way to the ballot box that's in the BMD, which is crazy, right? As Dr. Philip Stark, risk limiting audit expert at UC Berkeley, said, that's a security fail, because if the machines are hacked, the hackers could cause the printhead, after you've inserted your ballot that you verified, to alter the ballot, to write in new votes, to cross stuff out, whatever it wants. All sorts of they could cause all sorts of problems. So that's a major flaw. We're demanding that they stop using the ballot marking devices as ballot boxes and instead use ordinary ballot boxes. Like other counties that have BMDs, the BMDs print out your ballots for you, you verify them, then you put it in a normal ballot box. That's what we're demanding that they do here for Los Angeles also. And the third major problem with this system is that they basically require you to use these BMDs. You cannot, they do not give you real paper ballots to print on, to hand write your vote if you want to. I mean, you can bring in your vote by mail ballot and you can use that if you want, but if you don't have that, you left it at home, you lost it, then they require you to use these BMDs.
Well,
So,
actually, that's not exactly true, because one of the things that I did when I was monitoring the election live on election day, I did the early voting, and everything went smoothly with the early voting. But when the big crowds came in on election day, the system got overwhelmed and people were waiting in 2, 3, 4 hour long lines. And I was over at the Warner Avenue School in Westwood, or Holmby Hills, I guess. And I knew that they had these paper ballots because I had already ascertained that during early voting. But they're sort of blank papers, yes, paper ballot, and you have to write in the office and then your chosen candidate. So right. I got, and one of the volunteers, one of the staffers actually helped me. No, it was a volunteer. It was another person. We got these, and I went down the line and I said, look, you guys, you could wait and cast your ballot on this machine, but chances are they're not going to find you, and it's going to end up being a provisional ballot, because that's what's been happening all over Los Angeles all day today. Or you could go to your smartphone and go to the ballot and see who you want and just write it in. Right. And a lot of people chose to do that, and we gave them to the person who was working the polls, and they were stuffing it in the box. Okay. But after a point, they had to open the box because they couldn't fit any more ballots in there, and so they got yelled at. They got yelled at by the lead inspector because they weren't supposed to open the box. But anyway, right. You're right. Yeah. You're right. It's ridiculous. Yeah, but you know what? They have a reason for that. And what they told me was that every precinct, because they don't have precincts anymore and they have voting centers, people can come in and they're not necessarily have the same offices that they vote for. Do you know what I'm saying? So that they couldn't have paper ballots that would apply to every person because of the idea that they have now voting centers and not precincts.
That's the reason they did it the way they did. Yeah. So originally they actually designed it without even those absentee write-in ballots at all. We made a big stink about that in February when they were giving the original certification, and over 3,000 people signed the Clean Money petition demanding that they make all these changes. And the one thing that Secretary of State Padilla did was require these absentee write-in ballots, which is better than nothing, but as you described, it's pretty horrible because you have to write in everything. Now, that is a fundamental problem now with these vote centers, is people can come in from all over the county, so they don't, it's hard to have that, it's not as easy as it was with precincts where they knew exactly which offices everybody was going to vote in. But what other counties do is they have these things called ballot on demand printers. And so when you check in and you say, I want to use a hand-marked paper ballot, they go, okay, they plug in your precinct, and then they just print out a ballot that's specific just for your precinct, that then all you have to do is fill in the bubbles like any other hand-marked paper ballot. That's what every other county does that has ballot marking devices, and that's what LA County doesn't. So we're demanding that they create these ballot on demand printers so that people who want to use hand-marked paper ballots don't have to do those horrible write-in ballots for everything. They get a printout just like in every other county. So those are the three main demands.
Okay, so now you are head of a very powerful public interest organization. You're known to the legislators, you're known to the community, you're certainly known to Alex Padilla. I got to imagine that since March, you've been trying to have meetings with him or to somehow influence him, and not everything is going to hinge on what happens in the public hearings. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the backroom efforts and what you found out from either him or his office about
Yeah.
what you want.
Great question. So in the original certification period, which ended like in February 19th or something like that, we had just enough time to do one email blast to our clean money list, sending a petition with these demands, just us, our clean money list. But that generated like 3,000 or 4,000 people who emailed to the official Secretary of State comment line. So very soon after, I got a call from the Deputy Secretary of State saying they wanted to have a meeting with me about this, because I got their attention with just that. I had a meeting, listened to all of our concerns, and unfortunately at that time, this was when they were finalizing their initial conditional certification. The only thing that they did then was they did add the part about requiring the voting centers to have the absentee write-in paper ballots, which is better than nothing. They actually put it at number 1 on the list of the conditional certification. So that's what they did then. Unfortunately, not even every voting center had them. I went to UCLA myself, and they didn't even have them in stock. So lots of voting centers didn't. So they didn't even implement that properly. Since then, we sent in a coalition letter, and when I'm done with this, I guess I'll put a link to it, signed by 42 state, local, national organizations and election security experts. Emailed that, sent that to Secretary Padilla and to Dean Logan, the LA County Registrar, and also to the LA County supervisors. And you saw we used that when we had meetings with the supervisors. And so far, unfortunately, the Secretary of State and Dean Logan have completely ignored it. We did not at that point, because they were having such problems even counting all the ballots that came in. And because COVID hit, we decided we were going to wait for any further big activism. We wanted to wait because what they were going to do is LA County had to do changes to address the number of the requests that were done, like fixing other smaller security issues. And then they're going to have a new testing, and that was just finished. So about a week and a half ago, they released the new security test that looks like it's fixed most of the smaller sorts of things that they identified, like USB ports and too many passwords and things like that. And now Monday morning at 10 a.m., that's when they're having the one and only online hearing about this, which is why we're asking people to comment about these security issues. And then they have until September 15th to give official comments on the Secretary of State website. And we're going to relaunch a petition to send comments to that. Now it's not just going to be Clean Money, but other groups like Money Out, Voters In, PDA California, Root Strikers, Daily Co's, a number of other groups are signing on this, so we can really drown the Secretary of State with emails. We're going to be asking people to make phone calls. We're going to ask people to tweet at them, et cetera. Because so far, I've made our request, our coalition requests, but other than that one meeting I had in February, they have not been responsive, unfortunately.
Yes, so basically you're having a Maestro call tomorrow. You sent out to your email list.
Yes.
If people have watched this show and they know what the 3 issues are, do they need to attend the Maestro call, or?
Probably not for that, no. If because I'll be talking about basically this same stuff. I'll talk a little bit about talking points. The more important thing would be to sign up for the hearing at 10 a.m. and I can send a link for that, because then we'll send you instructions and talking points, because everybody will have, it's going to be a WebEx hearing. I've never used WebEx before, but it's basically like Zoom. You can log in through the browser. I'll send you the link, and then they're going to have little reports, but then they'll have a public comment period, and you give your name and that you want to talk, and if you're with an organization, then you say that, and then they'll unmute you when it's time for you to give your maximum 3 minutes comment.
Oh, that's a good long amount of time.
Yeah. So I don't think everybody needs to do 3 minutes. I'm going to probably do 3 minutes to go through these issues, but regular people, it'd just be super important to say, hey, we're really concerned about these security problems with LA County. It affects not only the biggest county in the country, but the rest of California, obviously. And they plan, because this is publicly owned, Secretary Padilla is already telling the rest of the country about it. hey, we got this great new publicly owned system. It's really beautiful. And it does have some good features. You should use it. And LA, they're even talking about sharing with other counties and leasing it and so forth around the country. So no matter where you're at, this will affect you. And they need to hear that you're concerned about it. You agree with the all the concerns of the Clean Money, the coalition letter. You want them to fix those. You don't think there should be QR codes that are counted. You don't think the ballot boxes, the B&B should be used as ballot boxes. You think there should be really real hand-marked paper ballots. Just that will help. So they get a lineup of some organization leads like me and experts, but then just regular people saying, we're really concerned. Secretary Padilla, please fix this. Our elections are in danger.
Now, let me ask you this. You may not have an official California Clean Money campaign position on this, but everybody's kind of concerned about voting in November. And you have your people who think that, oh, if Trump loses, he's not going to leave, or people who think that Trump is sabotaging the post office. I personally have been reporting on the post office issue since 2013, and I know that these problems predate Trump. And the getting rid of the postal boxes and the sorting machines also predates Trump. But, because he tweets out these idiot things, everybody thinks that he's behind this and it's a great conspiracy. But regardless, does California Clean Money campaign have a position on voting by mail? I did a show with Jenny Cohn, who has a lot of issues with voting by mail, not Trump's issues, completely different issues. But it looks as if that's going to be the way that we're going to have to vote. Of course, I just heard the other day that the NBA is going to be opening up all their stadiums. This is really interesting. And I think that they can do socially distanced voting if people want to vote. But early voting is very important, obviously, and getting your thing in more than 2 weeks. So what are your organizations or your positions on voting in November, Trent?
Great question. So one thing the California Clean Money campaign is firmly behind getting extra money for states to be able to better employ vote by mail, so they have the resources to send it out to the post office, postal service, so that they can actually handle it, because they have these problems to pause any of those sorts of changes that they're making with the automatic voting things until after the election. We've been pushing for that. We have petitions for that, along with a lot of other groups that are, of course, pushing for that. We don't have a position per se on vote by mail, but I'll say my personal thing that I'd suggest, and you probably talked about this already, there is a danger in this election with the way that President Trump has been demonizing vote by mail, and very unfairly and wrongly. There has not been huge amounts of fraud with vote by mail. There's possible fraud and small scale fraud with all sorts of voting. That's why we need open source paper ballot voting. That's another thing actually our letter asks for, why we need to fix these security issues, et cetera, and people should use hand-marked paper ballots when they can. But there is a little bit of a danger with that, especially in some states, if all the Democrats vote by mail and all the Republicans vote in person, that on election night, it looks like President Trump has won because they haven't counted most of the vote by mail ballots yet, which go Democratic. So that's a potential, and then he will claim, oh, look, it's rigged because I won on election night. So, and there's also always a little bit of a danger with vote by mail. They can get lost in the post office, or it can get delayed in the post office. So I'd encourage people who want to vote by mail, who don't want to vote in person because you're worried about COVID, understandably, use the drop boxes for one thing, right? You fill in your vote by mail, use the drop boxes at a vote center or wherever. That way you're sure that it's actually delivered there. And if you're not particularly worried about COVID because you think that you're healthy, or maybe you already had it, or it's a socially distanced enough place, then it's probably a good idea to vote early in person if you can, just so your votes are counted for sure early enough. That's just that's not an official position of Clean Money, but that's just my view looking at it.
Okay. Well, that's about all the time that we have now. Please post the link that people can sign up to make public comment. What time is this hearing again? 10 a.m. on Monday?
10 a.m. on Monday, California time. And it should, there'll be some discussion, but then about 10:15, 10:20, sometime soon after that will be when the public comment is. So it's really important to have a long lineup of people. So any of you listeners who can do that, that will be a very valuable thing you can do. Usually we try to pile people up in carpools to Sacramento, which is a huge organizing thing.
Yeah.
It's very, very effective. You've seen that, Lauren. This will be a lot easier. It's just a WebEx call. So
yes, this is a lot easier. And I think that COVID has made a lot of changes in all of our lifestyles. People are starting to see that they can do things online and they don't have to schlep people down to be in person, what they can do, over the telephone or online. And even courts, I was speaking to an attorney the other day, filings and things like that, making presentations are now being done online. And it's really better for the environment when you think about it, because you don't have all that car emissions getting into the air from all these people driving down to somewhere to do testimony.
That's true. It's a very positive change. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for having me on the show, Lauren, and thanks for everything you do, and thanks for everything your listeners do. So.
All right. Thank you, Trent. I'm going to promote my upcoming show now.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. All right, everyone. So that was Trent Lang from the California Clean Money Campaign. And I just want to let you know that I'm going to be back with the show next Thursday at the same time, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And my guest is going to be Jody Evans, who's one of the co-founders of Code Pink, Women for Peace. And she's going to be with a couple of her co-workers, Kelsey and Cody. And they're going to be talking about the divestment from the War Machine campaign that they've been working on. They are getting students up in Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, were able to get their university to divest from war companies. And there's a campaign going for the city of Chicago and the city of Corvallis, and a whole bunch of other things that is really important that we should be talking about. And also the overall concern about BlackRock, which is the largest investment manager there is. And they have a lot of the pension funds, the state pension funds, the local pension funds, and to try to get these pension funds divested from BlackRock, which is also why we need a public bank, by the way. These things go hand in hand. Get away from these Wall Street managers who take so many fees for themselves and do not plow the money back into the local communities like a public bank would. So that's going to be my show next Thursday. And I want to close my show the way I always do by telling folks to stay safe, stay home as much as possible, wear your mask, and keep fighting. Good night.